Hello and welcome to this new video of the People of Gestalt in OD made by ODNE Europe. We have the pleasure of receiving today Dr. Talia Bar Yoseph Levin from Israel. So we're really lucky to have you today. Thank you for coming, Talia.
Thank you for inviting me.
I'll start by introducing you. You have a doctorate in psychology. You're a psychotherapy.
Yeah.
You're a clinical psychologist, Gestalt therapist, international trainer, supervisor, and business consultant with a special interest in family businesses, PTSD, and leadership. You've trained with Miriam and Erv Polster and a variety of GETILA trainers. You trust that Gestalt philosophy of being is an infrastructure to human connectedness, dialogic leadership, the bridging of difference, and uniquely contributes to a better world. You're currently chair of the Israeli Gestalt Association and a representative to EAGT. You're former president of AAGT, member of the Intagio Executive Committee, and currently co-chair of Jerusalem Gestalt Institute. You were the head of the department, of the Gestalt department at the Metanoia Institute in London and gained an academic recognition as MSc.
Yes.
Yeah. And you were the academic director of an 8 years training in the Czech and Slovak Republic and 5 years training in Greece. You've participated in organizational training in Italy and Poland, Ukraine, co-run supervision trainings. You've edited books, The Bridge, Dialogue Across Culture in 2005, Gestalt Therapy Advances in Theory and Practice in 2011. You've published a significant number of academic publications in books and journals. And in your free time, you paint, mostly aquarels, beautiful ones, might I say. I had the pleasure to see them. With baskets, you love to cook and totally enjoy 2 daughters and 3 grandchildren. Want to add something? Did I miss anything?
No, the best is the latter.
You're one of the first people who have started to teach Gestalt in the UK.
I don't think so. I'm not sure it's true. No.
Well, you're certainly one of the first people I've read theory from as a Gestalt student. What is your story behind entering the world of Gestalt?
Oh. Well, I did both. I studied clinical psych at the Hebrew University, and there was a course that you could get 2 points, which were many, and just come to, and you didn't have to get to be examined or to write anything, and it was a Gestalt group. So I took it because it was easy, and the master's degree was really challenging and tough. And it was not a good experience. For various reasons. I think it's not very important to go into it. So this is how I left Gestalt behind, and I actually grew parallel to studying Gestalt, to studying clinical psych. I also studied and learned how to work with organizations, more with groups, but within organizations in a different establishment, which was really amazing. And also challenging and interesting. And the school that they taught, just so that it's on the record, because I think many people don't know it, is a derivative from Bion, which we all know, which is called Pichon Revere. And I don't know if you heard about him. He's in Argentina, very interesting. I can't read the original language, but I've studied and I've learned with people who met him and worked with him. So, and it's very psychoanalytically based. And this is how I ended up in 1981 in the US for various reasons. En route back to Israel after 3 years there. Quite worried that I didn't develop enough. Looking for something to do. Lo and behold, somebody who was there said, go study Gestalt in Cleveland. It's a great place. I said, Gestalt? Nah. She said, yeah, go study it. It's easy to study. It's very interesting. It's down to earth. Go. I checked. The program was 3 weeks in, with quite a lot of space between them. I was on route back to Israel, 1981. Nobody traveled that much, definitely not me. So I said, it doesn't work. I said, you know what? I heard about these two people. I think they're called Erv and Miriam something, maybe Polster or something like this. They teach a whole month. Try. So my depletion just took me to go there because, again, it seemed, a solution. And I wrote a letter. It was April 81. And I got a letter back. Those days we used to write letters and put a stamp and wait. And I got an email back, a letter back. Sorry, we already booked for the past 2 years, maybe next year. But if you have any questions, please call. We paid $5 for the phone bill, the local phone bill. And it was a huge amount of money. I never dialed international call, not even national call within the US. I said, I'm going to call. I called, somebody picked up the phone, a nice man. I realized it was Erv Polster at some point. And I said, I'm going back to Israel. I won't be able to come back. And he asked me the obvious question, why are you so insisting on studying Gestalt? I didn't have a good answer. And what came to my mind, just like that, and I said, I need a corrective emotional experience. As Franz Alexander says, that I edit here in the psychoanalytical literature. There was silence, quite long. And then he said, you got yourself accepted. There was April. The course started in May. Mm-hmm. And after a week, I just knew that I'm in the right place. That's my home. That's where I want to be. It's a natural development the way I see it from psychoanalysis, which I really appreciate and I studied a lot. So this is how it happened. Strange coincidence.
Mm. Thank you. Really, really nice backstory. Very interesting how the field works sometimes. And from that column, you developed to being the author of numerous articles. One sentence is particular, Gestalt as a philosophy of being is quite widely known. I have quoted it personally numerous times in academic work I have done. Could you tell us something more about it?
I can, I'd love to. It's been a long while, and that's why I always start with the clinical psychology, next organizational work, and then arriving to Gestalt. Very long while that I'm very uneasy with the Gestalt therapy heading, or the name of the whole is Gestalt therapy. At some point, I was invited to write to a very nice journal that sadly doesn't exist anymore, that was edited by 3 very nice people, very valuable people in our field. And they invited me to write about the social impact of our work as organizational consultants. And they gave me a number of words, and it was very clear what they wanted. I started to write, and I couldn't write Gestalt therapy. So I wrote Gestalt-based, Gestalt. I submitted it. And one of the editors wrote back to me and said, it's not going to be published unless you write Gestalt therapy. I said, okay, so don't publish it. I do not want to write Gestalt therapy, not anymore. And we had a very fierce, wonderful argument. It was quite a number of years ago. And we found a middle ground, and he wasn't happy with it. I wasn't happy with it. And then I said, listen, the philosophical organizing principle is being a Gestalt human being. One derivative is Gestalt therapy, another one is Gestalt in organizations, another one is couplehood, and another one is how are you as a human being, and education. I don't know if you know, in Germany, they have a lot of work that they do specifically with Gestalt and education. And then, as we were talking, I said, for me, it's a philosophy of being. I don't think it's in that article. I think in that paper, we settled for Gestalt-based or something like this. I can't remember. But this started it, if you wish, and kind of organized. Now, there is nothing new about it. I only took what we all talk about, and I only put it under a different name, or a different heading. That's how I see it. And I think it's important. And of course, the psychotherapists do not like it. And there are many people that insist that the name of the whole is Gestalt therapy and anything else can be organized under it. I decided that I'm old enough to disagree. And to honor Philip Lichtenberg, who died not so long ago, who was one of the most amazing people on many ways, and I was lucky to know him and to be rather friendly with him. He was the first person at the Gestalt, at the AAGT conference in Philadelphia. However many years ago, he was a keynote speaker, and so should he be. And he got up, and in the middle of the talk, he said, and as Talia said, and quoted the Gestalt philosophy of being, which was for me the most amazing confirmation. And he was the first psychotherapist who agreed that we need to do something with it. So for me, it's really important. I don't want to sound too arrogant. I think it is important, not just for me. Obviously, you, as the organizational consultants, find it much better place to be under a heading that includes us rather than kind of puts us next to Gestalt therapy. And I think what it does also is that it allows us to actually slow down and realize, or at least be interested in the fact that we're much bigger than therapy. That what we have, that we can contribute, and we're talking Corona days, the world is in such a crisis. Just thought when you said that I'm, that I have interest and experience in post-traumatic stress disorder, it suddenly hit me that I'm back in the same place, and the world is not at the post-trauma yet, sadly, but in it. And I think it's time to slow down and realize that we have amazing contribution, that we can contribute to this quite wounded universe. And it was before the coronavirus attacked. So that's where I'm at with it. I would like us to be Gestalt beings. I often talk with Erv Polster on Skype. We have once a month or once in 6 weeks, we have a meeting, which I really love. And he always says, I don't like this philosophy of being. And I say, why? And he says, because being is the wrong word. I said, okay, if you want to find a better word, it's okay. As long as you agree with that, the fact that it is philosophy of, I'm happy. And for me, confirmation from Erv and Lichtenberg is quite a big deal. So and I don't know if I said enough, but this is where I'm with it.
Yeah, thanks. And I think it's really interesting, especially for some of the audience who might not be acquainted with Gestalt, to see the roots and how Gestalt in organizations came to be and took its rightful place as a methodology in organizational development and societal change per se, not under the hat of therapy, as you say, but as something that has much to give to the field.
Unique something to give. That's what I believe. And that's what you can find in The Bridge when we talk there quite a lot about our unique contribution.
You specialize in work with family businesses. What drives your passion to support family businesses?
It's a bit embarrassing because so much of what I'm going to say just came from the field as a coincidence. that it's almost strange. I realize as I answer your question. Nothing drove me, at face value at least.
Mm-hmm.
I was lucky, and I was invited to do a few pieces of work with family businesses. I'm going to talk about it in a minute, because I actually have learned from one of the family, I don't know how to call it, because he's one of 4 brothers and sisters, but one of them who's more interested in conceptualizing. They actually call it now family business rather than business family rather than family business, which is for me very interesting. I think once I got involved in a very complicated family, which is business family, the one that prefers to call itself family, business family rather than family business, I realized, looking back, that I actually have a lot of experience working with family businesses or business families. And the one that hit me the most is my 20 years experience, which is extraordinary on its own right, that I think many people who would listen to this probably know. It's nowadays, I think, the 3rd largest retail business in the world. When I left in 2012, there were just over 500,000 employees. And I realized that this is also a family business, or at least this has been. And the most amazing discovery for me, that I discovered not in 2012, but throughout, was to realize that the family values remain. So it's a business that many people might know. It's a business that started as a grocery shop in East London and grew and mushroomed. And for many, many years, the CEO was always a family member, even if the family member didn't fit the bill. And when I got involved in 1992, I think it was established in 1934. I hope I'm not saying something which is completely wrong, but definitely long ago. And when I got involved, it was 1992. It was the first time that the CEO was not a family member, but ex-married to a family member. And only the CEO after him was actually the first CEO, and it was, I think, already into the late 90s, probably, very late 90s, who was not Jewish and was not connected to the family, nothing. And I stood with him. It's another one of these funny stories. I stood with him at some reception. Somebody introduced me to him because I didn't work with him. I worked with a number of people who sat on his board and few teams. And I was introduced to him. He was talking to me a little bit. And then he hunched over and he said, I have to tell you a secret. I said, okay, what is the secret? He said, my grandmother was Jewish. And he kind of ended it, standing tall. And I said, this is fascinating that you want to share this secret with me. And he said, yeah, it's really important. And we continued the conversation. We started to pick all the Jewish specific family and Jewish traits that remained in the business, even though at that point they had probably 400,000 workers. And I think probably not even one Jewish person on the board. And that triggered my thinking. How we know that most of the businesses in the world are family businesses. But even when they become Fortune 25, something remains, which I think it doesn't have to be a rule, but it's very interesting. So looking back, I realized that I actually have worked and am working with a number of family businesses, some of them this small, and some of them gigantic. Some of them already not a family business for a couple of generations. And it's obvious, because if most of the world are family businesses, it's not a surprise that I too work with family businesses. But when I realized it, it became an interest of mine to actually highlight it, or to look at it and understand it. I'm answering more than you asked, I think. So
No, it's I'm really interested in the figure yeah, that is emerging, and you're probably right. I'm thinking about values, and but my next question connected to this would be, if it's all right with you, how do family business owners or manager respond to the Gestalt approach?
I know to answer only about the people that worked with me. I can also answer about the people that threw me out the door because they were not interested, but they were not necessarily responding as a family business. There were a few threw me out the door before I started to work, luckily, not after. It's a tough discipline. I think it's amazing discipline. At times people say, we are so small because we are not relevant, because we're not doing this, that, and the other. I think that we are so small because we are tough discipline. To hold on to the philosophy and to work from the philosophy is very demanding. And to hold dialogic stance is really difficult. And when you walk into organization, you know it at least as good as I do, if not better. Dialogue, relationship, now people know to rehearse the words, but I haven't seen enough change yet. So you come without a plan. I come without a plan, without brown paper. I remember somebody said, we walked into the room, there is no brown paper on the walls. People walk into the room, they check in, and they see what they want to do. This is very difficult. And it doesn't fit. So I don't remember once that there wasn't at least one person in the room, at the best, who couldn't understand what I want, who couldn't understand where I'm coming from. I think that what often I see the spark when people interview me, unless, they got my name and they already decided they want to work with me because somebody said do it. But when people are more thorough about it, interestingly enough, it's nothing to do with Gestalt, but probably how I present it is to do with Gestalt, is that people ask me, what's your added value? Why take you, not somebody else? And the first answer that I have is that, and it goes to the beginning of this conversation, is that because, or thanks to the fact that I'm a clinical psychologist, and I've done the entire training, which is in Israel, very, very, very long and very thorough, with huge exam at the end. And I have practiced. I'm not scared of anything emotional in the room. I have the tools. I come from a much more supported place. So I can bear whatever the room needs me to bear until the room can bear it itself. So it's not an answer about Gestalt theory, but it's the beginning of words like support, like see what is the figure, even though I don't necessarily use the words. I'm not a jargon person really very much, for better or worse. See what's right now, rather than come with a plan from 3 weeks ago. Maybe something happened. People say, oh yeah, really? So you see the Gestalt in how I speak, and you see the Gestalt in how I present my work. And on the whole, it's quite a bill of health, or not. Something must have been right. And I can tell you, just because, you see, we didn't interview last week, we interview now. Yesterday, I had a meeting with someone and her boss. And the reason I work with her, she's from a totally different country. She works for retail, is because her boss now works in that other country, in that other retail. And he wrote to me, it's a bit embarrassing, but I'm going to repeat it, LinkedIn. And he wrote, Tali, or he calls me Talia, there is hardly a day at work that I don't remember you. And I thought, wow, because it's not what I would have said to you, that this specific man would have said about me. And yesterday, and he asked me to work with this woman, and yesterday we had a 3-way meeting. And in the meeting, he used language. He started the meeting, he said, I'd like to check in. And at the end of the meeting, he said, I'd like to check out. He said, I realized how much I miss it. And I said, intervention, 2 seconds intervention was not at all relevant. I said, why don't you do it now with your team? He said, now I shall. So, and at the end, I was very moved. At the end of the meeting, I said, it's not often that we get so many years later, 10 years that I haven't seen him, haven't had anything to do with him, that I get such a confirmation that something about this theory is correct.
You're still present. So sorry for interrupting. You're still present in his mind.
Yes, and I really, it's again, I don't like, my father used to say, don't be big-headed. I really think a lot of it, yes, of course it's also me, but a lot of it is who we are, what we bring in. He said yesterday, I thought I knew everything. It was really sweet. He couldn't say it then, of course. And he did know a lot. My God, he's a man with this amount of experience and abilities and extraordinary on his own right. But something stays in the body, and this is our run. Because we don't just work like this. So something stays in the body, and it's bigger or more complete than, and he's intellectual. He could have kept things only in the brain. And I love it. I said at the end, not often you have the theory walking through the room. Thank you, theory.
Beautiful story. And which brings us to the next question. You've worked internationally in Israel and the UK and in other countries as well. How different would you say Gestalt OD work is in different countries?
Well, if you go back to the bridging of cultures, dialogues across cultures. I did not invent it. Gordon Wheeler did. And he asked me to write it. And I did not think that anybody has the right to write a book about bridging of cultures. It's ridiculous. I still think it is. So we settled for editing. And the one of the reasons that I'm so proud of this book is because I didn't write it. I can be proud of all the other people that wrote it. And what I've learned, and if you think about how old it is, because it was published first, the first publishing was in 2005, which is very long ago. And not a couple of years ago, I got so many requests to reprint it that I actually, because the publisher sadly died, I reprinted 500 copies and I said, that's it. So, we changed the preface. I think it's much better now, the introduction. And I printed whatever I printed. Thanks to the corona, I have some books left because I'm not traveling anywhere. But people didn't speak culture that much then. And this really, it wasn't me. It was Gordon who realized it and wanted to write about it. Oh, he was then the chief editor of the press. Editor-in-chief, I think is the right phrase. And we started to look at culture. And in those days, you mainly looked at culture by, it was mainly nationalities, ethnics. Now it's more obvious, but then it wasn't. And I started to look at who can write and what can be written about. And I realized one, for me, fundamental find that I take with me. It was the time that there were books about everything. The culture of India. You go to India, buy this book. You go to Japan, buy this book. You read, 35 pages about India and you're fine. No matter what color you are, no matter where you come from, you'll be fine in India, which I find really ridiculous in retrospect. And I realized, and that's the uniqueness that I talk about and I feel so strongly about. If you come in dialogic stance, it doesn't matter what the other culture is. Of course, it matters in many ways. If you're willing to come only with the wish, the stance, the intention to coexist. You will find a way if you bring with you the dialogic stance. So how is it in different cultures? Amazing. Sometimes, actually, it's almost easier when the culture is very different, because then it's easier not to assume. I go to England, come on, when you look seriously, you put an Israeli and a Brit, a world war. I see now, I just stepped down from being the president of the AAGT, happily, 2 weeks ago. So many complexities happened because of accent, because of different in tone of voice, because of difference of those who believe that they're the majority, so the world needs to behave as they are, whatever the majority is. Can be men, can be white, often it's white men, can be country-based. And to be able to say, wait a minute, it was very interesting. During the AGM, we, Yanis? You know Yanis, of course, from Intagio. We invited Yanis to help us with the Zoom, 2 days, very demanding Zoom community meetings and AGMs, which we've never done before. Instead, we all were mourning the conference in Ireland. And during one of the breaks, Yanis and I had shouted that that only Greek and Israeli, not only Greek and Israeli, but only people from that part of the world can have, and know that, no, they're not killing one another. But it's not the last conversation. They are passionate. And somebody else who is based in Scotland, but actually comes from a different country, was born in a different country. I spoke on the phone, so I didn't realize she's already in the meeting. She was supposed to be part of the debrief. And at some point, she, hey, stop it, you two. Can we simply have a meeting? Now, the argument was relevant, but she couldn't take it. And it took about 10 minutes. Both of us were laughing to explain that we're good. She was so angry, and for a moment, I felt very attacked. In 2 seconds and 3 cultures, now once we all took a breath, of course it was okay. But often, the disagreement and the difficulty obviously happens before everybody took a breath. Hence, the wish to coexist, which I put first. So, in a way, when I go to China, especially the first time I went to China, I know that I know nothing. When I go to Greece, I know everything. No, I don't. So I'm just, you see me, I'm excited, I'm interested. I try to be humble about it. And I also know that if something goes wrong, hopefully we'll manage to bridge. And if not, then there isn't a will to coexist, and then it's not worth it to bridge. I don't know if that makes sense, but I make a lot of sense to myself.
No, it does make a complete sense, and I can definitely relate to it, to some of it at least. And because we're on the topic of cultures, and I know I haven't put it in the question, but if you're all right with it, could you tell us something about diversity and the BLM movement and the use of Gestalt? Do you have any point of view on this topic?
The simple answer, it's the same. If we're willing. One of the things that if we're willing to coexist, I'll complete the sentence first. If we're willing to coexist, if we are willing to go from internal to external dialogue continuously and in a flow, then it's the same. And that's, sometimes I feel very boring because I keep saying our uniqueness is exactly in the same place. It only gets a completely different content and face and whatever when we're there. So if we come into that place, into the meeting place, interested to coexist, as I said before, on our backs, dear Martin Luther and dialogic stance, seriously, not just game, then we need to be able to meet. Then starts what we know. Do I really admit that being white is privileged? Can I really have a conversation with it when I still keep myself and also somehow include the other, be it black or be it, it's not the only diversity. Black seems to be now back on the cards. I'm very worried that it will disappear again, as it happens for years. Can I say, I don't want to say that I'm white, privileged, racist woman. Can I choose my own words? Not always. Often not. Now, I can start by saying this sentence if I have to, but where is the premise of inclusive, honest, authentic, present? If I start from something that I say, maybe it's okay. I don't know. I like not knowing in this place. What I do think, and it's bigger than the diversity, is that the world is falling apart. It has been falling apart way, way before the global crisis. Some defined as crazy people want to look at ecology. Some crazy people pay attention to black racism, diversity. Not enough. And when I commenced when I took over the presidency of the AAGT, my wish, my conviction was, my obligation was to find more connections to other organizations, I prefer Gestalt organizations to begin with, and together create a different mess. I failed. For various reasons, and it's not a debrief about my presidency, but I definitely failed, abundantly. And I'm sorry about it. So I know I don't answer your question again completely and exactly. I think we created at the AAGT, we have a people of color group, interest group, that didn't want any white people in it, and which I totally respect, whether I like it or not. I respect it by it being it. We created a white interest group. Both of them work quite nicely. I don't know, and I feel a bit depleted about when are we going to talk together. And the AAGT is just a symbol. It's a symbol. The AAGT is not different to the rest of the world. And I think if we don't wake up, we're going to be in even bigger trouble. So I'm saying that with a lot of sadness. And it's not simple. I don't know how to do it. And it's interesting because we have a short, I created some kind, with someone else, Rodney Cole, created a series of, to begin with, 6 meetings with 6 people who volunteered to do it, actually 7, because at the end there is a couple who does it together, pair. That address, I call it attention to racism, power and privilege, just as a beginning. It's not enough. It's a very small beginning. But the woman who just gave the last seminar on Saturday presented the seminar, and she reminded me, because, I'm the owner of it with Rod, so I was sitting there, also talking a few words, and she reminded me the book that you just talked about in 2005, and she said, but you have been looking at it since. There's a very large number of people. They are amazing people who contributed to the book. So this is when I feel a little bit less depleted.
Mm.
Something has to change, and I don't know how it can change. I stay in the dialogue, of course, but not simple.
Mm.
So that's my best answer. Maybe after we hang up, I'll have more answers, but that will be too late.
Mm. Oh, thank you for this answer, and you've made me reflect. And still, you have made quite a few initiatives to start with, so it's quite a big deal, especially in the Gestalt world.
Doesn't feel enough.
Well, I do hope we will get the ball rolling, at least in our community, sooner rather than later.
Well, if I can, you take me to a different place, which is connected.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I know we're not talking enough maybe about family businesses, but that is, we have an opportunity as organizational consultants, call it whatever you want, OD people, whatever, Gestalt people in organizations. We have the opportunity to impact vast number of people.
Mm.
And yes, it's an agenda. You can call it an agenda, and it doesn't go with the dialogic stance. I own this agenda. Every organization I go into knows it about me. There is something that we can do because we work with organizations.
Mm.
And when you extrapolate the people and you put together their business and the families that are left at home, or the partners or the kids or whatever, and the customers, you potentially have huge number of people that if you come with any social interest, we have the opportunity to impact really the world.
Mm.
So, working at Tesco was a privilege, was a crazy privilege. Because whatever I said that was accepted or was remodified or whatever to do with my values, I told them, go home, see your kids once a week. I'm not talking about 4 times a week, 7 times a week. Go home. Or go to a school play. Became part of the whole. Mm. And for me, that's an amazing privilege that we have. So it goes for race, it goes for anything. It goes for difference. When we talk organizations, and it does go back to family businesses very nicely, I remember, I'll give you a short example that I've often used. I walked into a division at Tesco, and all of them directors, high up at the organization, everybody says a word about themselves. One of the guys says, I was sure he's laughing. He says, I have a wife. 2 children. Yeah, 2 children. A boy and a girl. And he's not sure what he's saying. It was incredible. Intelligent he was, educated. And I was shocked. I remember he sat next to me and I said, wait, you're not sure if you have 2 boys or 2 girls? He said, no, I think I have a boy and a girl. And then we talked more. And he explained. He said, I leave the house, I shut the door, my wife is not allowed to call me, I'm going to work, I've left home, I'm going to work. I leave work, nobody from work will call me home. Those are completely 2 different entities. We had a conversation, an energetic conversation over a while, because it was such a dramatic polarity. Mm. But actually, we know in million variations that he just, I never heard such a sentence before. I've never met such a phenomenon. And he actually became very aware of it, and there was a lot that was done with it and with other people and the relationship between home and work and this thing that I hate, life-work balance, like life is not a work and work doesn't have a life. I hate this statement. I prefer to talk about life balance if people want to. And 3 or 4 or 5 months later, as happens with teams, somebody left and somebody new came in. And we said hello to this. And he said, this guy, he said, I want to speak first. I said, sure. He said, I will tell you, I have a wife, I have a boy and a girl. This is their age, this is what they do, and this is where we live. And everybody was laughing, and the new person was looking, where did I come from? Too. And he explained. And he said, I didn't realize what it cost me. The effort I put into the not mixing the two. And if we take it to family businesses, if I'm allowed, shall I? Or you want to say something?
Yes, it's fine.
If I take it into family businesses, which is why I so like the expression business family, it doesn't matter if you work at the business or not. It's exactly the other polarity. Everything is enmeshed. So whether you're in the business or outside the business, it's always there. If it's around the table, we all know it. Something about actually doing the other direction, of finding the difference and finding the separation and who am I without this and what am I, and then finding the middle ground, which again is our uniqueness, looking for the middle ground rather than the polarities. And that's why I so like the business family, because business family reminds us that the wife that sits at home she has massive meaning, for better or for worse, if she supports, if she doesn't support. The two kids, the one that doesn't agree to go into the business. If we don't look at the whole, and if we don't dialogue with the whole, it doesn't work. Family business and business family is so difficult. So many disappointments. And, as the bigger the expectations are, the bigger the disappointments are. And just last sentence, that is a place that I believe that if you don't have enough ground as a clinical psychologist or as a psychotherapist, you can, by definition, you cannot give the best of what they need. Whatever that is, I don't know.
And that's what I was going to say when dealing with business family or family businesses. We are dealing with a lot of family dynamics, which can be emotionally loaded.
Has to be, Angelica. Has to be. And everything comes in. The cultures that women are not as good as men. The culture that suddenly there is a very strong, wherever you look at it, it becomes very complicated. Ambition and less of, and you wanting to do something else. It's huge mess.
You've been really generous to us with a lot of stories.
Should have been a storytelling.
To reflect on. Well, the last question was to tell us a little story of your work as a consultant and the use of the Gestalt approach. Do you want to tell us a last story?
It's really difficult to pick one. I always go back to the same story. So people probably heard me telling it. And the reason I go back to that story is quite clear to me. The more times that I tell it, then I regret that I didn't tell 10 others. Because I think it culminates most of what I'm trying to say and what we're trying to say. I worked in another retailer, for another retailer in London, in UK based. And I sat with the retail, what was the name of the team? I think they were in charge of the retail. And it's always the largest division because basically that's what they do. The shopkeepers. There were 11 people. I think 10 did exactly the same. Each one of them held a group of stores. The guy who ran it, who sits on the board, of course, and the HR director and the financier. Always the financiers hate us, at least hate me, because I'm too complex for them. And I cost too much money. And it's very funny. And a very young man, only 31 years old, very bold. You'll see why I'm saying it's part of the story. We were talking about life balance. And he was talking about the fact that he had a new boy, the first one. He was 8 months old. And he took pride in the fact that every Wednesday, because in England it's very common that you leave home on Monday morning, you come back home only on Friday night. And he made it a point that every Wednesday afternoon, he leaves work around 4:30, so he will be home by 7. Just imagine how many hours drive to bathe his son and put him to bed. And he tells the story, it's a whole day that everybody is grappling with family and, putting together the home. And he says, and as I drive, I apologize to everybody I speak to, and I have a meeting that is fixed to that time, explaining why I leave. Silent. Everybody's very happy in the room, listening to him. And I had a very small intervention. I said, you do what? And he looked at me. I'm going to take my classes before I break them. I'm going to take them off. He looked at me and he said, I apologize. And because he was bald, that he gave on his forehead was very loud. The room was very quiet. And he put his head down on his knees, between his legs and he said, what an idiot. And it was deadly silent. People, I think, understood already then. And I said quietly, nobody said anything. And he raised his head just like this, between his, and he said, apologize. And he couldn't talk. And even now, even between us, even though it's a very silly format, I can feel the air, changes. And I said, what do you want people to take from you driving home at 4:00? And he said quietly, and he said, I want them to know that it's a value, that family is important. I want everybody to know that at least once a week, they are more than welcome to go home early. I see it as a must. And the room, you could cut the air. You could feel how it went to all these people and these people. And I said to him, I asked him, I said, how many people are you responsible for? He said, I think about 35,000. And I still lose my breath when I say it, because that was the moment that I realized that this interaction just freed 35,000 people to listen to their families and to their kids. And for me, I said it already, it's such a high value. And I also believe that otherwise you can't really produce what you need to produce for work anyway, because the split is expensive. And it was an unbelievable moment. And I always go back there, and it's not the only one. But something in it was so poignant and so fundamentally important for me and for this whole thing. And after a long silence, everybody started to chip in. That's not the only one. I have a couple more. Where suddenly going to school play became a reason to stop a meeting. 1994, that a guy would say, I have to drive to a play school, maybe I can leave the meeting early, and then we all decide together to stop the meeting. So for me, this is who we are.
A very inspiring story. Thank you. And we were at the end of the interview. Thank you so much, Talia.
Time flies when you're having fun. Good.
Thanks for being with us today.